You just shortly introduce yourself, right? But very shortly. So I need to come back to the question, Gustav. How come that you used to work for yourself, right? And you just kind of switched to the corporate job. Obviously, Airbnb is a nice one, but you just made the switch. What made you actually, or influence your decision? Yeah, that's the first one.
So I joined Airbnb having worked on my own company for about 3 years, selling that, nothing spectacular involved in selling that company. Worked for another startup, doing messaging for another couple of years. And it's really tricky to find companies. They have an absolutely amazing product. Like, they don't come along very often. And when you find one, you want to see if you can work there. And Airbnb came about, and I was like, this is an unbelievably good product in so many ways. It creates an enormous market. It changes the lives of both the guests and the hosts. And it was growing really, really fast. So I started talking to them, and I was like, you guys don't need a growth team or someone like me, because I've been working on growth before that. And I came there, and there was like 3 people working on growth. So even for something like Airbnb, it was growing through natural adoption. They absolutely needed a growth team. And I was super excited when I found out that there was no growth team there, and they absolutely needed help working on growth. And when I joined, I think we were probably 35 engineers. So it's a decent company at the time. Yeah. When I left, we were almost 1,000.
Okay, good. Could you tell us more about yourself?
Yeah.
Because you didn't have a chance to.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ramon. And as Gustav said, I work for YCombinator as well. I joined 4 months ago, and I help YC with the software and also with cryptocurrencies right now. And similar to Gustav, I was working on my own startup for a while. Then I went through Techstars with a different startup. And then lately I had the chance to join YCombinator. And I also found out that they were not exploring so much cryptocurrencies yet. So it was a great opportunity for me to join and try to lead that effort.
Okay. Thank you. This is for you. All right. And tell us everything. Tell us worst of your mistakes you made as a startup, because we just want to hear the stories.
Sure, I can start with that. So there are absolutely a number of things that we learned at YCombinator that we try to help the companies with when they join. I'll just go through some of the things that we've seen in the patterns over the 10 years. Starting a company with no technical co-founders is bad. It's really helpful that you can, it's not just like being technical, but it's the ability to build your product. Once you build your product, it's going to have to change. And if you're relying on someone else to build a product, it's going to be hard both to build it and to change it. And the really only way to succeed is to be able to change and continue to iterate on a product. If you're relying on someone else to do that, it gets hard. 2, it's really hard to be a single founder. It's just really hard. There are some people that are single founders that are excellent and build great companies, but in general, it helps to being 2 or more. So we encourage people that apply to be 2 founders or more. Now, there are definitely people that apply and get accepted that are 1 founder, and that's totally fine. But in general, we've seen that it's better to be more than 2. Launch early. If you're waiting a year from when you build something until you launch, you've waited too long. Most of the times, you wait too long. If you launch a product when you feel uncomfortable, that, I can't believe that I have to put this in front of people, you're launching absolutely the right time or probably a little bit late. You need it to feel uncomfortable because you're going to have users start using your product, and that's when it's the time to launch.
So fail fast.
Fail fast, launch early.
Okay, that's what we do here.
And one more as a counterpart. Gustav mentioned that it's really bad to not have an engineer on your team, but I found it also equally bad to just have a team full of engineers. And because as an engineer, you tend to work on the product, work on features, and you don't get out of the building and you don't talk with users. Because it's easier to build one more feature than getting out and talking with users.
Okay, talk to your users. Nice one. All right. YCombinator, right? YC, legend, right? So people say it's the most, or maybe #1 accelerated program in the world, but people here applied for Techstars, people here applied for Plug and Play, for many other ones. So what actually makes the YC unique? How you differentiate YC from any other acceleration programs?
So it's hard for me because I haven't done any other programs to speak about them. I think our mission is to have more innovation in the world. And whatever way that happens, that is good. And the way that we can be helpful is the things that we've learned over the last 10 years. And we've probably seen, I'm just guessing, more successful companies than most of the other accelerators. So we've learned more things about what works. And we've built a larger knowledge base of things that do work. And we absolutely apply the same data that I was talking about how you use for product, we apply to trying to understand companies and what the best kind of best practices are to start a company. And those are the kind of things that we recommend to our companies. The second part I would say is the network. So joining Y Combinator, you join the Y Combinator network of all the other companies that join that network. And that network is large, but that network has a single unified experience. So everyone went through Y Combinator in Silicon Valley, in Mountain View, and felt the same thing walking over the bridge to the Y Combinator building, and we're there for all the same events. We have a shared story, which means that when you are reaching out to another founder in Y Combinator, you actually do have something that is very similar to everyone experiences the same things, which definitely helps with the kind of keeping the network together, and it helps with kind of keeping the doors open between the companies. This is going to be a challenge to scale. Like, as you're growing the number of companies in a program like this, how do you make sure that the community stays really strong? This is the number one thing that we're working on right now, and is something that I think everyone is going to have to challenge. But it's really, really important that you're joining a network and you're joining a bunch of other companies that can help you with everything from trying your product even though it's not ready, to giving you an intro to that person that wouldn't otherwise help you get in touch with, whatever is important for you during the program.
Okay, thank you for this one. Is anyone in this audience knows about the YC fund, which is separate from YC program, which invests 120K into the startup? Anybody knows? Okay, a few people. That's the reason why I'm asking you now, just to address this issue, talk a bit about the YC fund, how much you invest, where you invest, why you invest, etc.
So the vast majority of what we do is the early stage program, and this is what I talked about earlier. We invest $120,000 in 120 companies every 6 months. That's how vast majority of our investment does. More recently, in the last 2 years, we started something called YC Continuity. That's a different fund. Different people are working on a different fund. But we saw an opening in the ability to fund companies throughout the life cycle. Now, there's a very important question here, which is the question of signaling. If you're taking seed funding, and then let's say you take a small amount of seed funding, and then you're taking that from another fund, and that fund doesn't invest in your next round, sometimes that's bad, because other funds are going to be like, why isn't that fund investing in your round if they already invested? They know something, is things good or bad. So we avoid that. We don't invest in the next round. To raise money from Continuity, you have to wait a couple of rounds before Continuity gets active. So YC do our round to get into the program, but at demo day, Continuity does not invest in companies that do go to demo day. That's where all the other investors are investing.
And how much you invest as a fund?
Continuity invest a large amount of money, usually 10 plus million, sometimes more than that. More recent investments were Segment, Convoy, which is a non-YC company. But typically it's going to be YC companies that they invest in. Going to be a lot fewer investments. I mean, every day there's probably a YC company raising another round, statistically. But the Continuity Fund is not active more than maybe once a month or every 2 months.
But usually you do pro rata investment in
Correct.
your company, right? So
Correct.
basically, okay, good sign. All right, very often I've been approached by people like saying, okay, can you do the intro for the YC partners or YC companies? Does it really help? Or you have just a process and you just follow the process?
It usually doesn't help in my experience.
Thank you. So don't ask me the interest for the YC anymore, okay?
The whole principle, I'll answer it quickly. The whole principle of why you should apply online is a reaction to how Silicon Valley used to work 10, 15 years ago, where it still works today to some extent, is that you have to network yourself to a general partner of some of the other firms. And if you are based in India, or if you're based in Ukraine, it is hard to network yourself to a general partner in a Silicon Valley VC firm. It is really hard. And it's kind of unfair that is something that should be the same amount of expectation of someone who went to Stanford to literally learn that in school to someone who has a great startup, but it's not based in Silicon Valley. So when YC was started, it was literally the simplest possible way to apply, and that is through an online web form. The online web form have grown significantly, so it is not just like three fields anymore. It is a video, it is data around traction, and all these things are important. And we spend a huge amount of time reading the applications. Like each application is viewed by many people, and usually 2 or 3 of the partners as well. Every single application, and we get 8,000 applications for every single batch. The benefit of applying to Y Combinator multiple times, which is a question I often get, should I apply? Am I ready to apply? Well, if you apply once and you don't get in, and you apply again, the first thing we will look at is the progress between those 2 applications. You only get the benefit of showing progress if you apply twice, because then you can literally see where stage you were at 6 months ago and what stage you're at today. And we'll look at that progress and we'll say, well, this progress is great. And progress is one of the most important kind of predictors of a successful company. Someone who's making progress, someone who's determined to keep working at it, even if things are hard. Those are some of the most important predictors versus someone who's giving up. Giving up is a very obvious prediction that things are not going to go well.
Yeah. And to give a little bit more detail about the application process, there are actually like 7 different steps. During these 10 years, we actually built a lot of software to help us narrow down the applications. For example, there is YC alumni that helps review the applications, then the partners review the applications. We even have an AI that also helps review the applications, and then we do interviews, both online and then on site, and then finally we select the companies for the next batch.
Okay, thank you for this explanation of how the process works. But do you actually only focusing on inbound application, or you have the process when you're kind of looking around or kind of focusing on some hot startups and kind of invite them to the YC programs? How it works?
We are here now. I would say this is part of the outbound.
Okay.
So
Fair enough.
yeah, meeting you guys here, meeting you guys for office hours, all of those things are part of telling you about Y Combinator, getting to meet companies. We try to keep all the notes about a specific company in the same field, same database, so we can keep track of the companies that we talk to. It's not going to be random. Like, we want to meet as many founders as possible. It is impossible to meet 8,000 companies, but it is not also a good thing to be stuck in Silicon Valley or stuck in Mountain View the whole time. Like, you definitely want to go out. This is part of something called the World Tour. So every fall, sometimes twice a year, we go around the world and meet startups. And we are literally this week and next week at universities around US, in Israel, we're going to be in India. Like, we're all around. And we're going to the places where there are some of the best technical founders, some of the best engineers in the world. That's where we think that the next great company is going to come from. And this is why we're here in Ukraine.
Also, the YC alumni is our biggest source for referrals. That's why creating YC network in different countries really helps, because then they are kind of like our mavens in different countries, different cities that help us find new companies.
So you don't need an intro,
Yeah.
but you can get a recommendation. And the best recommendation you can get is from an YC alumni. So seek out another founder who's done the YC program, and you have to convince that founder to recommend you. You can't just ask to recommend you. You have to convince them why they should recommend you if they don't know you, and that recommendation will absolutely help.
In this regard, the next Tuesday in the Fedorif Hub, there's going to be 3 founders of the PetCube on the stage. So we have an actual opportunity to pitch one of those 3. Okay, and actually today at the breakfast, the investment breakfast with UVCA members, you mentioned that up to 50% of the startups are actually international, right? So that's the correct figure. So basically, YC is kind of international acceleration program, you may say, right? Okay, so it's a 50-50 chance for you to get enrolled in this program, right? But I mean, it's a general question, but still, what is the, let's say, ideal portrait of the startup that you will actually accept? I mean, just, I know, 3 reasons why would you accept the startup.
So, in our experience,
Accept revenues, of course.
Yeah, in our experience, it is very hard to evaluate an idea in the early days, but it's very important to evaluate a founder. In the very early days, the founders is the most important thing. we look at the people and look at the background of the people and what they have done. And we look at the progress that those founders are making. That's why it's important to show progress. We also look at kind of the specific expertise you might have in the area. It is better to have had a problem yourself and then you're solving it and that is your company than you're picking a random idea from the sky. It's much better to have had the problem because then we know you guys passionately care about this problem and passionately understand what is wrong with it and how to fix it. We look at persistence, so people that are not giving up. Persistence is one of the best signals for great, successful companies, and giving up is, of course, the opposite of that. Like giving up too early, too many times, is a sign that you are not going to get to that moment that I was talking through in my presentations where things would really, really accelerate and take off. Like Airbnb is a great example of this. Airbnb, for the first year, had basically no revenue and no booking. For one entire year, they launched a product, and they kept launching because no one noticed them. No one knew about them. So they're like, oh, well, they should launch again, because no one knows about it anyway. Doesn't really matter. We're not embarrassing anyone. So Airbnb launched like 3 or 4 times because it didn't really matter because they weren't noticed. And it was only when they started focusing and talking to their users that it started growing. And they started doing this during the YC program. I'll give you a quick story about how this happened. So what Airbnb came to, called Airbnb and Breakfast at the time, came to YCombinator, and Paul Graham at YCombinator asked them, where are your users? Like, oh, they're in New York. Oh, you have like 50 hosts or something in New York. And then Paul's like, you should go there. Go to New York. Go talk to them. Because you don't know what they need or what they want. So they flew to New York and they talked to all of their hosts in New York in person. They emailed them and said, we're going to come by and take photos of your listings. And they didn't say that they were actually the founders. But they came by with a camera, took photos, and they wrote down all the bugs and all the things they can fix about the product and taking photos. And literally the day after, they emailed them and said, we put up all the photos of your apartment on our website and we fixed all the bugs that you told us about yesterday. And every time they did that, they got massively amount of happier users. And they left, after those trips, they left New York and they had 50 hosts that loved their product. And literally, in correlation to that, revenue started growing to $1,000 a week, $2,000 a week, $4,000 a week. And then we're on the track that Airbnb is still on.
Yeah. Another great example of how we look for a strong wit and will. You probably know about Soylent, the drink that is in Silicon Valley. It started YC and it was a CMS platform. So you can see how big of a change is that. And they are a successful company.
Yeah, it sounds like the founder and persistence is more important than idea, right? Doesn't mean the idea worth nothing, or without the founder, it worth nothing?
The idea is not worth any. It's not worth nothing. It's absolutely worth something. It is much better to have an idea that's working for a very small number of people than an idea that's not working for a large number of people. It's still better to have 100 people, a few hundred people that love what you're building than to have like a lot of people that don't like it or don't really care. So that's why it's important to have a small number of people that really, really love your product. You can learn a lot more from that, and we can look at that and see if you have 1,000 users that have like amazing retention or they're all loving your product, that is much better than coming in with like, oh, we have 500,000 users and no one's coming back. That is not useful to tell you anything whether your product is good or not.
Yeah, regarding the idea, Paul Graham used to say that idea only matters to refer to the strength of the founders. If the idea is really bad, then that reflects bad on the founders. So it's another signal.
Okay. Would you give any advice for the founders, because the time is most valuable assets, right? What should be the focus of the founders at the early stage? Basically, this people they apply for the YC program is in the early stage. What should be the focus? Is it lawyers? Is it fundraising? Is it product, customers?
Yeah, I mean, as Gustav said before, I think talking with users and coding, you need to focus on those two things. I mean, if it's software, obviously it's going to be building an application or a website. If it's hardware, it's going to be getting your first batch out, so you can iterate, doing a Kickstarter, and then talking with your users, getting out of the building.
Yep, that's true. You want to talk to users. You want to make progress. You want to measure yourself so you know whether that is actually progress or not. Find some way of measuring yourself. And spend time building. Don't be distracted by competitors or always going out fundraising or always like reading the news about startups. Don't go to conferences. Don't do any of those things. Just go and work on your product and try to learn from your users. That's how you're going to build something that eventually will become big.
Thank you, because I keep saying this for a number of years. Okay, thank you. Actually, I'm also saying that technology is only 20% of the business and 80% is execution. Do you agree with this statement?
Yeah, I mean, technology is how you transform something to become innovative. I think today, technology is probably the most important force in innovation in the world. But there are a lot of bad technology that just are not good. So you absolutely need a great execution. You need great products. You need great design. You need kind of great companies to set up with the right values. Technology in itself is not enough for sure.
Yeah, technology is just a means to an end. I mean, you can spend 6 months building the perfect technology just in your garage, and then you get out there, and then you find out that nobody wants your product. But the technology is perfect, but it's worthless.
Thank you. You can post this quote on your Facebook now, okay? That the YC and AVentures think the same. Okay, so please do this. All right, let's wake up a little bit. You've been in Ukraine for what, like 48 hours so far? All right, so I have a question for you. What do you think about the Ukrainian startup ecosystem before and now?
Before?
Yeah, before you, I mean, before you came here and now, because today you just met people, you meet in us, you feel the energy, you feel the everything.
I felt deeply impressed being here, super excited. We chose Ukraine by looking at the number of applications that's been coming from here and far outpacing many other countries around here. That's why we came here. The companies I met today, deeply impressed by how much progress they've made, the great sense of design, the great sense of product, how everyone seems to be very technical. There's a strong technical foundation here, and that is super critical. It is. When YCombinator started, we basically started with the idea that it's easier to teach a technical founder the business side than to teach a business person to code. And that is probably still true. So it is easier to learn how to build a business if you're a great engineer than to do the opposite. It seems like there's a lot of great engineers here, a lot of great product people, and super excited to be here, invited by you guys. Super thankful to be here.
Yeah, similar. Really glad to be here. And I mean, we knew that in Ukraine there is great technical people, great coders, even lately, like Bitcoin, Ethereum contributors. But in my personal case, I didn't know that the ecosystem was growing as much as it is doing now. And it's great to see from the VC point of view, founders, entrepreneurs, media. It's great to see it.
Okay. So we're glad to hear this. So basically, do you believe in the future of startups in Ukraine then?
100%.
Okay, cool. And hopefully the currently 4 startups from Ukraine are part of the YC, and we at AVentures already part of 3 of those. So hopefully our plan is to be up to, a few dozens of those, right? Hopefully with your help. All right, I have a last question, and then I will just ask probably a few questions from the audience. So the questions that I have, which is very serious, by the way, so just please pay attention to this one, because it came from you, it was selected by us as a very interesting question. It is a life on Mars in your mind?
We'll have to...
Or rephrase that one. Do we have any opportunities to relate it to that one?
I think we have to fund the company who's going to figure that out.
Okay. Cool question. Do we have any in this room? Okay, we have one, guys. Okay, cool. Any more? All right. Oh, 2, actually. We have 2 space-related projects, right, I guess? No? Okay. You just want to go on Mars? No? Okay, that's a different story.
We've actually funded quite a few space-related, rocket-related companies in the last couple of years. You might think, I forgot to put that slide on my presentation, you might think that YCombinator is all about consumer companies. That have massively changed. In the last batch, there were 30% of the companies were consumer companies, and 70% were something else. And the strong things we've seen are healthcare, biotechnology, hardware, robotics, space, and rockets, energy. There are a lot of new fields that we didn't see coming when the program was started. That are absolutely emerging right now. And if my view of this is that there's one single thread through all these companies, and that's technology. So when technology meets some other industry, whether it's farming or energy or space or something else, then some new innovation will happen and someone will come up with that idea and start that company. And those are the kind of companies that we're founding now.
So basically, no restrictions on the startup anymore,
No
right?
restrictions.
No restrictions. Cool. All right. So I'm done with the question. So if you have any, you have an opportunity to ask one. Okay, please go ahead.
The question was around growth hacks. So the answer is that it doesn't really make sense to try to focus and share growth hacks. Because what makes sense for you is to build an engine that comes up with these things on a regular basis. And that engine is an experiment framework or some way of measuring and trying multiple things. It doesn't really help you very much to come up with like one or two ideas on how to grow SEO. What helps you more is how to figure out how to measure whether those ideas are good, because then you can try many, many, many ideas on how to build better SEO if you actually know which ones start working. There was a company in the batch before the last batch, called Rank Science. Rank Science is basically offering an experimentation engine for SEO. So if you're building SEO, you have a lot of content, you have a lot of SEO traffic already, check out Rank Science, and they can literally help you at rankscience.com. They can help you with SEO experimentation. And then you don't need to know which is the one idea that will work for SEO, but you come up with a bunch of ideas and you should try them all. Because literally, that's what an experimentation engine allows you to do, is to figure out which one is actually working for you.
Yeah. And the growth hack of the day changed every time. 1 year ago was Instagram, 10 years ago Facebook or Facebook contests were like the hot thing to do. And as Gustav said, having the framework is much more important than the specific tactic.
And if you know about a growth hack, it's already past you.
Yeah.
Because most of the things that are really good ideas right now, people are not going to blog about or tell you about, or if there's like a hack on how to get more clicks on Instagram ads or something like that, or how to do custom audiences on Facebook better, these are not going to be public things, because you go to a growth conference and people actually don't tell you the real things that they're working on. Because why would I share something to my competitors that I spend 3 months developing and they spend 1 day copying?
Okay.
So the question is like about data science and what role should data science play in a product company. At Airbnb, we had a data science team of nearly 100 people, and every single product team had a data scientist involved. And the job and the role of that person was to support the product team in making the right decisions, both in data research, come up with like hypothesis through data, or helping out with analyzing experiments that you were running and trying to figure out what actually happened, or generally just trying to make sure that we are instrumenting and tracking everything. In the case of Facebook, where the data science teams made forecasts, well, making forecasts is good. Making forecasts is good because that means you kind of know what you're going towards, but the forecast itself didn't say where the world was going. So what happened at Facebook is the world changed. When the world changed, the forecasts have to change because you have to change the company. But without data scientists and without data, you don't actually know anything. You're just using your gut. Like there's so much hidden information and there's so many patterns inside your product that you don't know if you don't measure it. So the only way to know this is to actually instrument it, use Mixpanel, use Amplitude, use Google Analytics, something like that, and instrument your funnels and put a metric on every single thing that happens in your product and try to learn from that. And that is ultimately what data science do. Data science is a more advanced way of doing that, but that's basically what it is. And you need to have quantitative. I can't think of a single successful company that don't have some aspects of data science or some aspects of instrumentation of their product. Like it is absolutely critical. It doesn't happen in the very, very, very beginning, but it will happen like once you get to a couple hundred or 1,000 users. So the question was around how you analyze A/B tests and if you try to figure out what made it successful, and then around personalization. And why it was unsuccessful. Yes. So a common thing when you launch an A/B test is you change too many things. And things go up and go down. And you're like, was it that thing or that thing or that thing? I don't really know which thing that actually caused the difference. So when you run an A/B test, you kind of want to change, like at scale, you want to change fewer things. When you're small, you have to change big things because you don't really have any options, because otherwise you don't get any signal on the data. But when you're larger, you don't want to change everything because you don't know which specific things that changed. Let me give you an example at Airbnb. We changed the homepage. And we were like, oh, the homepage is much worse than the old one. It's not converting very well. And we were like, just kept testing, and we figured out, oh, it's way slower. So if the speed turns out to be a very, very important thing in experimentation, and a slow website performs much worse than a fast website. So if you want to have a good hypothesis how to make your product better, make it faster. That almost always works. Almost always works. So yeah, back to the question, like how do you figure out which part of the experiment didn't work? Well, that's kind of a job for the data scientist to try to figure out which metrics changed for what users. Is there a pattern that you can see along the things that changed? You can also basically ask your user researchers to try to understand how do you perceive this new experience versus the old one. Like, see if you can get some qualitative data. But the main kind of answer to the question would be test fewer things. Try to test like small things, and then you figure out which specific thing is the one that made a difference.
How many A/B tests Airbnb run?
How many A/B tests does Airbnb run? I think the growth team in 2015 ran 200, and 2016 was higher than that. So this year is going to be even higher than that. So we literally have a metric that is how many experiments are we running at any given time or per engineer, because that metric matters. We want to have more experiments per engineer. It's not just any experiment, but you want to have good experiments that you're running. But we've saw basically a correlation between the more experiments you run, the more progress you do. So sometimes when I ask companies, are you running experiments? They say yes. I also have to ask, how many have you ran? And they say 2. I'm like, well, statistically, out of 5 experiments, 2 will fail, 1 will make no difference, 1 will be a little bit positive, and 1 will be a success. So maybe the 2 that you ran were the 2 that failed. So you should always think about, well, statistically, you have to run a few more because not all ideas are good or not all ideas are bad. So I have to run quite a few more to get to some randomization where like the good ideas will start coming.
Do we have time for questions?
We will absolutely come back here. Like this, we'll do more of these things, and for sure coming back here. I think it's hard to scale in organizations by moving internationally, and not just from the purpose of YCombinator, but also from the purpose of like startups that we see. A very common way that startups fail, or fail in some ways, by opening a new office, because that new office is not going to have the right culture, the right values, always the right people. You kind of have to do it in a very specific way. When Airbnb opened the office in Dublin, the founders moved to Dublin, and they lived in Dublin for 2 months. And they literally lived there in order to make sure that they set the culture, they make sure that the first hires were the right ones. It's very, very easy to fail when you start a new kind of office somewhere else. So I think with all the stuff in mind, we're very cautious about moving YCombinator into other places because it is so easy to fail doing that. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to be here. We're going to try to be here as much as we possibly can. And we're doing the world tour once or twice a year, so that means we'll come back. Maybe someone in the back. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
So the question was about doing startup school, and does it make any difference for applying?
Yeah, YC online school.
Yeah, the YC startup school, the YC online school. So the most amount of difference is going to make to your company, because hopefully you'll learn something in that startup school that will change the direction, and even if it's in some small way, of your company. And that change the direction will then improve the numbers, and then improve the story that you'll be able to tell YCombinator when you apply. You shouldn't think of YCombinator as like, I need to do these 5 things. I need to kind of like do these 5 things, and then I'm going to be a successful company. Like ultimately, you're not really trying to impress us. You're trying to impress the user, and if you impress the users so that they love your product, then you are going to impress us. So it's more important to focus on that and say, if you say, I did startup school and I learned these 5 things or these 3 things and I applied them to my users and now they are more likely to be engaged. That is a pretty good outcome, and you can tell YCombinator that I tried some of the things that I learned from the program, and now users are more using my product. That probably, the secondary effect of that is going to make it more likely to be accepted.
Yeah, 100% agree with Gustav. One small thing is like when you go through startup school, you have a teacher that is an alumni from the YC network. So he's gonna write the metrics and the reviews of your company. So obviously, if they are really positive, that will make a small difference. But you'll still go through the normal admissions process anyway for the test batch.
Okay.
What does it mean to be a good founder? I think it means the founders, for the first thing, someone who's starting a company for the right reasons. Why are you starting a company? Are you trying to be famous? Are you trying to be rich? Are you trying to do something? Well, the primary reason to start a company is that you are realizing that you are the one to solve this problem in the world. And there's a problem that you set out to solve, and you are the one to do it. And you can do it. Well, that's probably the first place that you want to start. I mentioned some of the things earlier, like being a technical founder it means you're a great founder because you can actually go and do it. You can actually go and make those iterations to the product that you have. Being a founder who really, really deeply cares about your users, that is a good founder. That is someone who will make the right decisions for your users and not take advantage of your users and not somehow put yourself at conflict with your users, because your users are going to be want to make you successful. So you want to be someone who thinks about users that way. And then one thing I would say is a founder that cares about your co-founders. So when we see founding teams of 2 co-founders or 3 co-founders, and there's a business founder or 2 business founders, and they have 85% of the company, and there's an engineering founders have 5%, and there's someone else have 10%, whatever, then that's a bad sign. That means you don't value your co-founders. Like, a startup is not a 6-month or a 1-year thing, it's a 10-year thing. It takes a long time to build successful companies, and after 6 months, if you determine that you are entitled to 80% of the value and your co-founder to 10% or 20% of the value, then you're probably not valuing your co-founders in the right way. So when we see founding teams that are more equally split, that does not have to be 100% equal, but is more equally split than that, that's a good sign. It also is a good sign that you're valuing your co-founders.
Yeah. So number one reason why startups fail is co-founder dispute. So one signal to be a good founder is you can find a really good team, and you can work together, and you have a shared history together.
Right. Probably. Okay. 2 more questions. Okay, upsell. All right. You see, that's a skill. Always be closing. You see, so he's just closing here on spot.
The question was around how you go internationally, and one way to think about it is that your market is the world, not your country, and the world speaks English. The world uses Google. The world uses Facebook. The world is acting in a very specific way, and you want to build your product towards that world. But it's totally fine to start testing the market in your home country. That's the country you know the best, and that's where you can get the first customers. But then you should plan to go out and be in the world. You don't always have to move to every single part of the world to grow there. You can very easily just do things on remote. You can grow, and you can do sales, and you can do all those things. And that is absolutely fine.
So you don't have such a requirement to relocate founders in the US market?
No.
Okay, cool.
A lot of companies join YC for 3 months, and then they move back to their home countries. Actually, that's probably the most likely scenario.
So it is possible to build a global company out of Ukraine?
Absolutely. Spotify is a great example. It's like probably the most successful Swedish company. I grew up in Sweden. Spotify is now a massively global country in every single part of the world, and they are still based in Stockholm.
Good.
That's a really good question. The question was, when you come from your home country and you go to YCombinator for 3 months, how do you make sure you stay close with the customers when you're not in your home country, you're in Silicon Valley? Well, the truth is that's hard. And some companies do go home and go back to, we had an Indian company in my group in the last batch, and they went back twice during the program because they had to do some specific things on site. They had an engineering team, and that is totally fine. You don't have to be there the whole time. It is great if you be there most of the time and attend all the events that you learn from, but if your market is somewhere else, then you should go back to it. And India in specific is such a large market. It is like almost 1 billion people, or 1 billion people, that you probably want to just focus on India for a long time, because there are hundreds of millions of people online in India, and you can build a very large business just focusing on them. This is how most of the Chinese companies have built businesses just focusing on China. So some countries are big enough to be your core market for a very long time. If that's not the case, then you want to figure out a way to go international and go into multiple countries for sure.
Okay. Last question.
Me and Ramon talked to 10 companies today, and the question was, do we have any recommendations in common? I can give you one recommendation. It's very, very important to have a clarity on how you speak about your company. You can do this test very easily. Just go and find someone who doesn't know anything about what you do, and you spend 15 seconds describing what you do, and then you ask them, do you know what I do? And if they say, I don't know what you do, then you have failed. And it's very, very, very important that you do this to the point where everyone says, yes, I understand what you do. And it is very easy to get this wrong. Most companies actually are not that good at explaining what they do because it's so ingrained in the product that it just becomes really hard to understand what you do. So that would be one thing, is really practicing explaining what you do so that everyone really understands it in 10 or 15 seconds. That really, really matters.
Yeah, following on that, having a clear, unique value proposition and knowing who your customer is, what are you doing, and why are you doing it.
So what YC is doing?
YC is helping bring more innovation to the world. We want to see more startups and more founders and more innovation.
And you support them with value add, capital, etc. Okay. I have a last question. Actually, it just come up to my mind. Here in Ukraine, we're trying to build the blockchain cryptocurrency cluster. So, what do you think about the blockchain future?
This is a question for Ramon.
I think the cryptocurrency market in general is growing crazily right now, maybe even a bit too crazy. Maybe to get a bit of context, there are like around 1,000 different currencies. 900 of them may not be around a year or two from now. But I think because Ukraine in particular has really good developers that are contributing to core projects like Bitcoin or Ethereum, this is a place that can foster innovation in different cryptocurrencies and even create whole new blockchains.
Okay. All right. Actually, it's not the end yet, okay? Because, well, first of all, thank you for your time and the answers.
Thank you so much, everyone, for having us.
Okay, thank you. Let's give a round of applause.